I signed the lease without even stepping inside. It wasn't like me to do something so impulsive. Normally, I'm cautious to the point of paranoia. But I was desperate. New job in a new city, no friends, no time to shop around. The photos online showed a weathered but charming two-story house tucked behind leafless oaks. Cheap rent, utilities included, available immediately. A perfect start, or so I told myself. I arrived on a fog-drenched morning in February, the sky a pale bruise. The air smelled like wet bark and earth, heavy and old. The house crouched behind a black iron fence. It was older than I realized, timber darkened with age, a sag in the porch roof, windows clouded like tired eyes. But something about it felt still, too still. Inside, the house groaned when I opened the front door. Wood floors, a musty smell, dust clinging to everything. It had been empty for a long time. My footsteps echoed into rooms I hadn't seen yet. The hallway stretched straight through the house like a throat. Every sound, keys jangling, my breath felt swallowed up. I dropped my bag on the floor and started to explore. The kitchen had an old iron stove and rust-flecked sink. The upstairs bathroom featured a clawfoot tub. The bedroom window looked out over the overgrown backyard. Then I found a boarded window. It was in the living room, tucked into the far corner behind a leaning bookshelf. At first, I thought it had been broken, maybe boarded to keep animals out. But the boards were clean, newer than the rest of the house, and screwed in from the inside. Not haphazard, either. They'd been fastened precisely, tightly. Someone wanted it sealed. I crouched and peered through the gap between the planks. Nothing. Just darkness. Curious, I tapped the board. A dull sound. Solid. I pressed my ear against it. Faint silence. No breeze, no scuttling. Just dead air. That night, I slept on the floor with a sleeping bag and a stack of unopened boxes. The house creaked and shifted as if adjusting to my presence. I left the hallway light on. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to a sound. It wasn't loud, just soft tapping. A rhythmic tick-tick-tick. I thought maybe it was a branch or a loose pipe. I stood, bones aching from the floor, and followed the sound. It led me to the living room. The sound was coming from the boarded window. It stopped when I stepped into the room. I stood there a long time, my heartbeat in my throat. Nothing happened. I waited until the silence felt unbearable, then returned to bed. The next morning, the boards looked exactly the same. But when I got close, I noticed something I hadn't before, small scratch marks along the edges. Thin, shallow, like fingernail scrapes. I told myself it was rats or raccoons. Maybe someone's cat got trapped in the wall, but I didn't entirely believe it. That night, the light came. I had dozed off reading in bed when I noticed a flicker from downstairs. A soft, pulsing glow. It wasn't the hallway light. I turned that off. I got up, heart already thudding, and tiptoed down the steps barefoot. The glow was coming from the living room. It spilled faintly around the hallway corner like spilled milk. I stopped just outside the room, eyes wide. The light was coming from the cracks in the boarded window. It pulsed, slow and unnatural, not like a flashlight or passing car. It had a sickly hue, like rotting yellow. I approached carefully, heart thudding in my ears. The boards glowed at the seams, like something behind them was breathing light. And then it stopped, like someone had blown out a candle. I stood there, barely breathing. After a minute, I turned the light on. The room was empty, the boards unchanged, but my skin prickled and a cold sweat gathered at the base of my spine. The next day, I asked the property manager about the window. She paused. That room's always been like that, she said. Previous tenants never complained. I pressed her, asked why it was boarded, who did it. I think the owner did a long time ago. I'm not sure. It's just always been that way. I didn't believe her. A week passed. Every night, the light returned. Never bright, just faint pulses. It never appeared at the same time. Sometimes 1 a.m., sometimes closer to dawn. Always just long enough for me to notice. Then the dreams began. In them, I'm walking through the house. Everything's gray and cold, like I'm underwater. I hear knocking, always the same rhythm. I open the door to the living room and see a small girl standing in front of the boarded window. She wears a faded white nightgown. Her back is to me. She's whispering. When I try to get closer, I wake up. Each night, the dream gets a little longer, a little louder. I start recognizing details in the room that I hadn't noticed before. A stain on the wall, a broken toy. It's not just a dream. Last night, the light didn't just flicker. It flared, bright, blinding. It poured through the cracks like molten honey, casting warped shadows across the ceiling. I didn't go downstairs this time. I just sat up in bed and watched the light crawl beneath the door and dance across the floor toward me. It stopped just short of the mattress. Then it retreated, folding back into the boards like smoke being sucked into a vent. I didn't sleep after that. Today, I noticed something else. On the wood floor, directly in front of the boarded window, tiny wet footprints. Bare feet, too small to be mine. I wipe them away, but I don't think it matters. I feel it now. Watching, waiting. Whatever's behind that window, it doesn't want to be there anymore. And I think I'm the one who's going to let it out. The footprints returned the next night. I had wiped them away with a rag, convinced I was imagining things. But the next morning, they were back, wet again, darker this time. They started just in front of the boarded window and stopped a few feet into the room, as if the child or whatever it was stood there and simply disappeared. I didn't sleep well. I kept my eyes on the door all night. I kept thinking I'd hear that knocking again, or see the soft glow start to leak in from beneath the door frame. But nothing happened. Not that night. I started noticing other changes in the house. Subtle at first. Doors slightly ajar when I'd left them closed. My phone moved from the charger to the kitchen counter overnight. I thought I was misremembering. I started making notes before bed, writing down exactly where I left things, how many lights were on, which windows were shut. I was trying to catch the house lying to me. Then came the whispering. Soft, barely audible, like the breath of someone talking from inside a closet. It happened when I passed by the living room. A faint, raspy voice saying something I couldn't understand. I froze the first time I heard it. I walked in, turned the light on, and stared at the boarded window. Silence. I walked closer and pressed my ear to the planks. I heard it again, louder, whispering but fast, like a child trying to say something very, very urgently. But it wasn't in English. I didn't recognize the words. The rhythm was strange, repeating. I could feel my skin crawling, my eardrum vibrating slightly with each syllable. Then the boards grew warm. I yanked my head back. That night, the dream returned. Same girl, same faded nightgown. Only this time, she turned around. Her face wasn't finished. Where her eyes should have been, there were smooth bulges, like her skin had grown over them. Her mouth was barely a slit, stitched at the corners. Her hands were shaking, fingers twitching unnaturally fast. She looked up at me and started raising her arms, and I felt myself begin to scream. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The next morning, I noticed the boards on the window had changed. Slightly. One of the nails was loose. It stuck out, just a little, like someone had pushed on the other side. I didn't touch it. Instead, I called the property manager again. "Look," I said, trying to sound calm. "I need to know about that window. What happened there?" A long pause. Then, she spoke more quietly. "I really don't know much," she said. "But a tenant years ago, before I started, he covered it up himself. Said he saw something looking in at night. He left without notice. Just vanished." That didn't help. I asked about the history of the house. She hesitated again, then gave me an address to the local records office. I drove there later that afternoon. I spent hours combing through documents, permits, tax records. The house was over 100 years old. It had changed hands over a dozen times, more than half through estate sales or sudden evictions. A few redacted police reports from the 70s. Nothing solid, nothing I could hold on to. Then I found a newspaper clipping. It was small, yellowed, wedged between articles about a church bake sale and a local man's retirement. The headline read, "Child missing after house fire on Delaney Street." The address was mine. According to the article, in 1978, a 6-year-old girl named Samantha Palmer had vanished during a house fire. The fire was mostly contained, though firemen found signs someone had escaped through a side door. Samantha was never found. Her room, according to the article, was in the northeast corner of the house. That matched the living room, specifically the boarded window. I left the office shaking. That night, I nailed shut my bedroom door. At 3:03 a.m., I woke up to humming. It was soft and sweet, like a lullaby. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It echoed faintly through the floorboards. I pressed my ear to the floor. It was beneath me, coming from the living room. Then came the knocking. 3 knocks. Always 3. I stayed in bed, paralyzed. The humming stopped. The knocks didn't come again. At dawn, I unsealed the bedroom and stepped carefully down the stairs. The living room light was on. I didn't remember turning it on. The boards looked the same, but something was on the floor, something that hadn't been there before. A crumpled piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was old, yellowed at the corners. A child's drawing done in waxy crayon. A stick-figure girl stood next to a brown house with a large black square drawn where the window should have been. Jagged red lines spilled from the square, reaching toward the girl. And in the corner, a crude face, no eyes, no mouth, floated above her head. It was signed in clumsy, childlike letters, Sammy. I stood staring at it for what felt like hours. Whatever was happening in this house, it wasn't over. It hadn't even started. I didn't sleep that night. Not after the drawing. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the piece of paper, running my thumb over the waxy crayon lines. Every so often, I thought I heard something upstairs, a creak, a dragging sound. But I refused to go up. I stayed where I was until sunlight filled the windows. Then I burned the drawing. I set it in the kitchen sink and lit a match. It curled and blackened fast, the flames eating the paper in seconds, leaving nothing but soft gray ash. But that night, the drawing came back, folded neatly on my pillow. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just stared at it until morning came again. That's when I decided I had to open the boarded window. The idea of it had haunted me for days. What was behind it? What might be on the other side of the glass? I told myself it was just a window, just light. But the boards were warm again that morning, almost pulsing under my palm. Something wanted out. I grabbed a crowbar from the basement. The first nail came out easy. Then the second. My hands trembled, but I kept going, working across the frame. The wood groaned slightly as I pulled the last board free. I dropped it to the floor and stepped back. The window was intact beneath it. Not broken, not covered in grime. It looked freshly cleaned, almost polished, as though someone had just wiped it down from the inside. And behind the glass, nothing, just the outside world. My backyard, the alley, gray sky. I almost laughed. I thought maybe it really was all in my head. But then I noticed the condensation. Tiny droplets forming on the inside of the glass, even though it was warmer outside. I leaned in closer and saw the outline of a small handprint forming in the fog. I stumbled back and fell over the boards I dropped. The handprint stayed for a few minutes, then faded. I left the boards on the floor and walked out of the house. I stayed in my car for 3 hours. When I finally went back in, the window was boarded up again. No nails, just the wood pressed firmly against the frame like it had never been removed. And sitting on the living room floor was another drawing. This time it was of me. I was standing next to the window, my mouth open like I was screaming. Long, red lines were drawn over my eyes. And behind me, scribbled in dark gray crayon, was the shape of a girl, her arms too long, her fingers reaching toward the back of my neck. I locked myself in the bathroom and threw up. I started researching again. Not just the house, but the girl, Samantha Palmer. There were no obituaries, no follow-ups to the article. No school records. It was like she'd been scrubbed out of history. But on an obscure paranormal forum, I found a post from a user named Stop Looking 78. The post was 8 years old. It read, "Delaney House is a warning. Don't answer the knocks. Don't take the boards down. Don't let her see your face. She doesn't know who she is. She only remembers the fire and the light. The light was a lie. The light is not your friend." I reached out to the poster. No response. That night, I had the worst dream yet. I was lying in bed, but I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed, and I could only stare at the ceiling. Slowly, the boards on the window, now somehow inside my bedroom, peeled away one by one, revealing a bright, blinding white light. It wasn't sunlight. It was too sharp, too cold, and from within that light, something began to crawl. It looked like a girl at first, crawling backward, her spine twisted the wrong way. Her limbs twitched as she moved, elbows bending in impossible angles, her skin blistered and peeling. Her hair was gone. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and her eyes, no, the skin where her eyes should have been, bulged like swollen grapes. She crawled onto my bed and reached for my face. Then I woke up, choking. The room was pitch black. I turned on my phone flashlight. The boards on the living room window were gone again, and on the glass was a sentence written in the condensation. "You let me see you." The boards were back by morning, but so was the humming. This time I followed it. It was coming from inside the walls. I pressed my ear to the plaster and could hear the melody. It was tuneless, like a nursery rhyme with no notes, just syllables and breath. I knocked on the wall. The humming stopped. Then something knocked back. I fell down the stairs, trying to get away. Sprained my ankle. I crawled to the door and sat with my back to it until the sun rose. The final straw came the next evening. I was taking a shower, trying to shake the fog from my brain, when I noticed something in the condensation on the mirror. Another handprint. This one was larger. Too large for a child. It was above mine, and next to it, drawn in the fog, was a face. A simple outline. Circle head. Hollow eyes. A slit for a mouth. The moment I looked at it, the mirror cracked. That night, I packed a bag. I wasn't staying another night in that place. I slept in my car, parked at the bottom of the street. I kept my eyes on the living room window the entire night. Around 2 a.m., the light appeared. It seeped from between the boards, pale and pulsing. Then I saw her, standing just inside the window. She didn't move. She didn't look at me. She just stood there, face pressed to the glass, watching the street, like she was waiting. I barely slept at all after last night, too much haunted memory lingering in every corner of my mind. I didn't want to go back in, not even to grab my laptop or the clothes I left in a hamper, but by mid-morning reality forced me. I needed clothes. I needed proof. I needed to know I had something, anything left that was real. I slipped inside through the back door before anyone could see me. The hallway light overhead flickered for a long beat before steadying. My heart thudded with every step. I walked slowly, the floor creaking beneath me as if groaning in protest. I made it to the living room. Several of the boards had shifted again, no nails visible, just wood forced into place as though someone pressed it from behind. One had a crack along the grain through the split. I saw a sliver of light, bright and wrong, like phosphorescent wrought inside the wall. I knelt and pressed my close. In the space beyond the board, I saw her, the girl, the missing girl I called Samantha, though I don't know if that's her name. She stood in the backlit haze behind a barred window frame, staring back at me. She didn't move, just stared. The lights in her eyes glowed, hollow, and she shook her head slowly no. I gasped and recoiled. My breathing caught. I needed to leave. I stood, only to see the crack widen. Light bled out like liquid, racing across the floorboards. I wanted to scream, but nothing came. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I nearly dropped the phone. Who was calling now? I answered, my voice a whisper. "Don't look," said the voice on the other end. It was the property manager. Not a warning. An apology. "I'm sorry. I should have told you." The phone line went dead. I didn't wait for more. I bolted toward the door and slammed it. Outside, I stood in the street cold and shivering, listening. No sound. Inside, though, I felt the house change. When I went back in, the color in the hallway had shifted. The wallpaper seemed paler. The wood floor looked darker, like it had been soaked in black water. And every surface felt glossy, unnatural, reflective. I grabbed the nearest mirror and checked my reflection. When I looked up, one eye was bloodshot. The other glowed faintly yellow. I dropped the mirror and stumbled back. The boarded window glowed again. Now patches of wood chipped away, tiny flakes falling to the floor. The glow came through them, slimy and bright, pooling in little puddles. I reached out to touch it. My hand was burned before I felt it, searing pain pulsing up my arm. I jerked away and stared. On the board, a message scorched into the wood. "Leave me, Ian." The words warped, shimmered. Behind me, the boards creaked and popped as though under pressure. I moved closer, compelled and horrified. The boards fell forward suddenly, as if on hinges, smashing to the floor with an echo that shook the house. She was there, the girl. She didn't walk or crawl. She hovered, just a breath above the ground. Her eyes dripped with light. Her faded gown frayed at the hem. Her small face tilted up toward me, mouth opening in a silent plea. I tapped my leg. something sharp and wet. I looked down. My hands were bleeding again. Patterned scratches across my skin, 5 narrow scrapes like someone's long nails. I backed out of the house and didn't stop running until I reached the local diner, sun just rising over the horizon. I sat in a booth, shaking, splattered with sweat, unable to speak or form my thoughts. The waitress finally asked if I was okay. I shook my head and stood. I tipped the money and left. Outside, the boarded window of the house faced me. But it's different now. It's open. I saw it, dark beyond the window frame, world-ending dark that you don't look at because it's an abyss not meant for human eyes. And I promise you, it looked back at me. I will admit to nothing. I lie to everyone who asks if I'm okay. I've told them my car was broken, that I'm moving out, that I never lived there in the first place. Because every time I picture the house, my stomach twists. Not fear, not horror, something older, something like exhaustion. After what happened last night, I can't think. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see the girl hovering in the dark, her eyes glowing as she stares at me without blinking. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move except to tilt her head and beckon. I spent the last 48 hours gathering what I could. Flashlights, candles, extension cords, a hammer, nails, a camera with fresh batteries. I came back to the house at night. At 2:17 a.m., the boards began to peel away on their own. I shoveled them aside and snapped a photo. Light pooled from the open window, faster than water, flooding into the room. But when I looked closer at the picture, I saw something else. Behind the bright glow, on the fence outside, stood a figure. Just a silhouette, taller than child, knees bent at odd angles. I showed the photo to someone later who fainted. Lights and cameras aren't enough, though. I want to lock it out. Nail it shut from the inside. Hammer each board tight. But the boards reassemble themselves when I'm gone. I leave the windows open. I leave the door unlocked. I don't know what she wants. I don't even know what it is. I turn the boards into a shrine at the workshop. Nails hammered across the fronts in chaotic stars. I thought it would sanctify them. Instead, they pounded themselves loose. Again, I'm losing the ground beneath my feet. The boards peel back at random during the day, at midday, even once at lunch in a cafe. I had a customer look at me funny when I left mid-order and ran outside, muttering something about installation. I'm not describing this to brag. I'm not chasing a story. I don't care if I'm ridiculed or ignored. I have to document this before I can anymore. Last night, I set up the camera inside, facing the window. I plugged it in, set the mic volume high, and waited in shadows near the doorway with ear pressed to plaster. It happened at 3:03 a.m. The house sighed. Then laughter, echoing, childlike, fractured across rooms. Then knocking, not from outside, but at the foundation. The ground beneath the house thumped 3 times, then silence. On camera, I watched the boards reassemble, and then the boards expanded inward, filling the room like a cage. I tried to push back, but feet crumpled in my hands. Then the shape emerged. A child on all fours, too fast, too silent. In the black, she moved like a spider. My flashlight caught her, and she froze. Eye sockets, once empty, now burned with yellow fire. Her smile crawled across her face like it had its own limbs. Then she disappeared, leaving a stain of wet footprints, leading not outward but toward me. I stood and backed away toward the stairs, and she followed, clicking her bare toes down the hall. I turned the flashlight on her, but when I did, the beam passed through her like she was made of darkness. I don't know how, but I stumbled up the stairs and into the bedroom. I slammed the door. I braced it with a dresser. Then all the lights in the house flickered, one by one, from top to bottom. In that darkness, she knocked. On the door. Slow at first. Then faster. Then 3 again. Tap, tap, tap. From the bedroom below came a second voice, my voice, calling her name. It sounded like I was speaking from a closet somewhere. Low, hesitant, pulling her in. I ran. I don't know where I'm going. I can't think straight. I tried to walk to someone's house, but I ended up back here, in a parking lot, in my car. I wrote this in the dark. The boards are calling me. They told me to. They said open. They said set me free. I'm not sure I should have. When I breathe, I feel her skin under my fingers. Last night something slid under my door. I didn't open it, but I felt her standing there, watching, waiting for me to call her. I don't remember if I did. I don't know what will happen next. I know I can't go back, but I also know she's coming. Here is part 5 of Light Behind the Boarded Window. The haunting presence expands, threatening to break through the boundaries of the house and the narrator's mind. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag Light Behind the Boarded Window part 5. The girl at the threshold. I will admit to nothing. I lie to everyone who asks if I'm okay. I've told them my car was broken, that I'm moving out, that I never lived there in the first place. Because every time I picture the house, my stomach twists. Not fear, not horror, something older, something like exhaustion. After what happened last night, I can't think. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see the girl hovering in the dark, her eyes glowing as she stares at me without blinking. She doesn't speak. She doesn't move except to tilt her head and beckon. I spent the last 48 hours gathering what I could. Flashlights, candles, extension cords, a hammer, nails, a camera with fresh batteries. I came back to the house at night. At 2:17 a.m., the boards began to peel away on their own. I shoveled them aside and snapped a photo. Light pooled from the open window, faster than water, flooding into the room. But when I looked closer at the picture, I saw something else. Behind the bright glow, on the fence outside, stood a figure. Just a silhouette, taller than a child, knees bent at odd angles. I showed the photo to someone later who fainted. Lights and cameras aren't enough, though. I want to lock it out. Nail it shut from the inside. Hammer each board tight. But the boards reassemble themselves when I'm gone. I leave the windows open. I leave the door unlocked. I don't know what she wants. I don't even know what it is. I turn the boards into a shrine at the workshop. Nails hammered across the fronts in chaotic stars. I thought it would sanctify them. Instead, they pounded themselves loose. Again, I'm losing the ground beneath my feet. The boards peel back at random, during the day, at midday, even once at lunch in a cafe. I had a customer look at me funny when I left mid-order and ran outside, muttering something about installation. I'm not describing this to brag. I'm not chasing a story. I don't care if I'm ridiculed or ignored. I have to document this before I can anymore. Last night, I set up the camera inside, facing the window. I plugged it in, set the mic volume high, and waited in shadows near the doorway with ear pressed to plaster. It happened at 3:03 a.m. The house sighed. Then laughter, echoing, childlike, fractured across rooms. Then knocking, not from outside, but at the foundation. The ground beneath the house thumped 3 times, then silence. On camera, I watched the boards reassemble, and then the boards expanded inward, filling the room like a cage. I tried to push back, but feet crumpled in my hands. Then the shape emerged. A child on all fours, too fast, too silent. In the black, she moved like a spider. My flashlight caught her, and she froze. Eye sockets, once empty, now burned with yellow fire. Her smile crawled across her face like it had its own limbs. Then she disappeared, leaving a stain of wet footprints, leading not outward but toward me. I stood and backed away toward the stairs, and she followed, clicking her bare toes down the hall. I turned the flashlight on her, but when I did, the beam passed through her like she was made of darkness. I don't know how, but I stumbled up the stairs and into the bedroom. I slammed the door. I braced it with a dresser. Then all the lights in the house flickered, one by one, from top to bottom. In that darkness, she knocked. On the door. Slow at first. Then faster. Then 3 again. Top, top, top. From the bedroom below came a second voice, my voice, calling her name. It sounded like I was speaking from a closet somewhere. Low, hesitant, pulling her in. I ran. I don't know where I'm going. I can't think straight. I tried to walk to someone's house, but I ended up back here, in a parking lot, in my car. I wrote this in the dark. The boards are calling me. They told me to. They said open. They said set me free. I'm not sure I should have. When I breathe, I feel her skin under my fingers. Last night something slid under my door. I didn't open it, but I felt her standing there, watching, waiting for me to call her. I don't remember if I did. I don't know what will happen next. I know I can't go back, but I also know she's coming. I'm writing this in a borrowed motel room 3 towns away. The phone is dead, but the lamp still works. My hands tremble so badly I can't hold my coffee cup. My body aches from sleeping upright. I haven't eaten in days, but I can't stop writing. I've decided that if I don't record this, it didn't happen, because it shouldn't have. 6 nights ago, I returned to the house in the dark, convinced that if I confronted her, I'd break the spell. I brought tools, nails, screws, scrap wood. I had intentions, defensive, protective, even ritualistic. I believed I could seal her away again. But I learned something. You don't sew up a wound by stitching the skin closed. I unlocked the front door just before midnight. The air inside was thick, smelled like wet plaster and something coppery. The floorboards groaned under me. I carried the boards I'd pried off last time, and a hammer, wrapped in cloth, to stealthily slide through the house. Downstairs, the living room waited, coated in lamplight from street lamps outside. The boards lay against the wall as though waiting. I hesitated. I could already feel warmth pouring through the cracks behind them, like a sun leaking incorrectly. I forced my fingers to steady as I lifted them. The air behind was suffocating, like breathing underwater. I pressed the board back in place and hammered nails clean through it. With each blow, the resounding echo felt too loud, as though the hammer struck more than wood. I hammered all 4 boards. Heart hammered with each strike. Then silence. Too deep. I stood back. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I saw it. A pulse like a heartbeat, visible through the wood grain in the cracks I'd hammered. The boards shifted inward, bowing in. I tried to resist, but the wood moved of its own accord, pressing toward me, as though the house itself was breathing. I stumbled backward. The nails popped out. Wood cracked and splintered. My hammer fell. Behind the boards, I heard a voice, not scratching or whispering, not even coherent. It cried. It sobbed. I'm cold. I'm all alone. Come play. I remember feeling something reach through a crack and brush against my wrist. Not human, not alive in the way I understand it. Not warm, not wet, hateful. I ran, out the door, through the street, not stopping. Since then, something changed. She's not confined to the boards any longer. It's in the walls. It's in the ceiling. It's in the dark. When I close my eyes, I see her. When I wake, I feel her. On night 5, I couldn't stand fleeing anymore. I returned to the house one final time, this time with witnesses. I called the property manager and said, "Show up at 2 a.m., bring the police." She didn't answer, but I called twice, fired off 6 texts. 3 hours later, I found the house unlocked. I entered. They weren't here. Who knows why? I crept to the living room, flashlight in hand. The boards were gone. No pile of wood. Just a window. Black. Inky. I shuddered. Then, behind the window light, dim and pale and pulsing, my flashlight flickered and died. Then I heard her voice. Soft. Clear. "I'm tired of waiting." I spoke, voice nearly broken. "I'm here." She didn't respond. Instead, the world shifted. The floor beneath me sank. The ceiling arced. The walls warped in. I felt gravity dissolve. I dropped forward into darkness, so thick I tasted it. I don't know how long I fell. When I landed, I found myself lying on a floor made of old, sun-bleached wood. A single bulb, swaying overhead, dim but glowing. Dust motes drifted in slow spirals. The air was stale like an attic. I stood. The room was small, bare except for a ragged cot pushed against a stained, wallpapered wall. In the center, a girl, pale beyond pale, kneeling on the floor. Her hair, white as ash, draped around her like spider threads. She held something. I moved toward her. My head pounded. My knees shook as I leaned closer. On the cot sat a broken doll, one blue eye missing, its cloth body torn. The girl. She looked at me, head tilted. She spoke with my voice. Remember? Memory flickered. I was 6. Late winter. My mother lay dead in the next room. I stood in the hallway. I heard scratching under the floor, knocking on the boards. I opened the closet. I looked. There she was. Not Samantha. My reflection, wailing silently in the boarding. Frozen, partly absorbed into the wood. She reached out to me. I screamed. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the girl was gone. Only silence, and a door on the far wall. I approached. I opened it. Light pulsed. I stepped through. I'm not sure I'm alive anymore. It feels like I'm melting. The ground is warm. The sky flickers. I'm standing somewhere outside reality. There's a window, boarded. Behind it, everything. The past. The house. The girl. Me. All of us. Intertwined. It's waiting for me to remember, to let her out, to become her. I don't know if I can resist. If this is the last thing I write, know this. The window opens when you think you're safe. The light calls your name when you're home. The boards bow when you stop believing. And if you pry them loose, you'll find more than a girl. You'll find yourself.